All right, so I will be walking around with this. All right, I'm here to present to you GroKit Core. And GroKit Core, well, we'll get to that. First, let's talk about 3 Pound for a little while. So 3 Pound Games have been around forever. How long, Robin?
I
A
don't know.
couple thousand years?
Oh, we've been around since 2008. Originally started as a mobile
Yeah.
company, and
Then VR happened.
you know, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's like cables everywhere, and we were all excited because here's XR, it's here to stay, and like Rule was here,
And that was over...
18 years.
Yes. That was way too long ago to talk about. But since then, we produced a lot of games, a lot of other things. Our first application was Space Dragon, as you can see from the great shirt right here. If you want to blast things, destroy planets, all that sort of stuff, that's the game for you. Originally was designed so that you didn't have to deal with teleport, if all you remember how important that was. So we specifically designed it so you could fly around in space and not get sick at the same time. We also did Slime Rancher VR when that was a thing, what was it, ages ago. Our current thing is GroKit, not GroKit. Nope, I always get that one confused. GroKit, which is a multiplayer party game we have with co-location. Take all the new features that Meta releases, and they're in there. Basically, co-location, hand tracking, networking. What am I missing? Oh, scene understanding.
Multiplayer.
Yeah, multiplayer. We don't only do games, we also do simulations. One of our big ones we did out in Arizona, we did nurse training for C. diff and how to clean a room. All that important stuff. You definitely want to clean a hospital room. That was ages ago, though. And from that, we've done a lot more things. We worked with a culinary institute where we were building Mise en Place things, and we do pick and pack, manufacturing, and a whole lot of everything else. Networking. But you're here to hear about GroKit Core, so let's talk about that. So GroKit Core, we've designed to be a development platform for building spatial computing. Because as all of you, I think, have all of you, who's built a spatial computing app? VR, AR, anyone? Yeah. It's the easiest thing in the world, right? You just press a button, and it goes. There's nothing else to it, right? And then all the tools like Meta and everything, they give you every single thing that you need, and there's no bugs, right?
Never.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I see a single bug.
I know, neither have I. So specifically, it's a spatial computing platform for games, business, solutions. You can build quite a few things with it. Bryce is actually going to even make a top-down game today with it, which is going to be hilarious to see. We specifically we call it a full-code solution with low-code implementation. What that means is you do not have to code to use it, but you can if you want to. Every single thing is public. Every single thing is virtual. I have given everyone the keys. If you want to be disastrous and delete something you're not supposed to, go do it. I won't stop you. The engine might, but I won't. And just to let you know, this is just for Unity, so you Unreal developers, good luck.
We're used to it.
I know. All right, specifically, we have a few things to talk about before into GroKit. We have our code and our GroBlocks. GroBlocks are a fancy name for our prefabs, which are pre-designated and ready to go. So they have a bunch of components on them. You just drag them out, and off they go. We'll talk about those in just a minute. Specifically, as I already mentioned, a flexible design. Everything's reusable. You can extend. We use C#, so you can do like we have an item trigger, and you can extend that as many times as you want. If you dig through the code, you'll find I think there's about 15 extensions on one of the guys I have, which is quite fun. As for integrations, we specifically are integrating with Meta right now. We have things for Pico and XRI and all that sort of stuff, but we specifically are focusing on Meta right now. We have AI integration, which we'll talk a little bit about. And we also got Ready Player Me in there if you want to have NPCs or avatars. We also have AI assistants to help you with the code process. We dumped all of the knowledge into an AI model, and, well, it'll tell you some things. Will it get it wrong? Maybe. It's getting there. We have documentation and whatever support you want. We have a support Discord. So if any of you are going to use the hackathon, feel free to join that Discord, and we'll help you out with it. All right. So as for features, if any of you, who's used Unity before? Does that look like a Unity inspector? Really? Where are these? Where have you seen those buttons before? Okay. Just checking. Yes, so our big thing that we have is we specifically have custom inspectors. I have been using these for quite a while. We have buttons that you can activate during play mode or not during play mode. So you don't have to wait and have something and set a key press and all that sort of things. We have beautiful headers and things to make things all colorful and nice to use, collapsible menus, all that sort of stuff. And most of that's open source, so you can adjust it if you need to. We specifically focused on the concept of Unity events, though, because they're very easy for implementers to use. And even me as a hardcore developer, I don't like to code everything. And it's nice to just drag something in and be like, do this function. Then I've got to do any extra effort. And then, very importantly, we have it working in mixed reality and hand tracking. We have drag and drop prefabs. If you want hand tracking with gesture support, you literally open the scene, drag the grow block for the hand tracking in, and press play. And then you can track everything. That's step one. Now, the core of how we use GroKit is we use activators. And these are fluffy concepts is how I like to describe them, of on and off. So if you think about everything in our world, it's basically on and off. You want to turn on a light switch, that's turning something on. Turn something off. You want to press a button, that's an on. You want to open a door, open, close. So take that concept of on, off, and apply it to basically anything you're dealing with. These actually have even more. There's, I think, 6 states last time I checked. So you have on, off, secondary off, and reset. But this will get you started. We have 2 specific type of activators. We call them inward and outward. An inward activator is taking care of itself. So if I want to press a button and light myself on fire, that would be an inward activator because I'm happening to myself. So the button that I press will tell me to light on fire. An outward activator is basically the direct opposite. That's on the light switch, and the light switch telling it to go and do things. Now, I admit this seems like a lot for what you're trying to build if you're just trying to move a key to a door, but the whole point of it is that as you get more complicated, it's very easy. You want to have 20 objects that turn on when you open a door, you just take the 20 objects and shove them into the outward activator. They'll all turn on. All right, now for common components, we have triggers, item ID, debug tools, and so forth. So you Unity developers, how many times have you written on trigger enter? A couple thousand times, if you're anything like me. So I built these triggers. They're ready to go. They're extendable. You never have to worry about writing on trigger after again. You can instead just write is acceptable. And the is acceptable concept is for yes, I'll take this, or no, I won't. So if you come up with your own custom components, off you go. Just add it to the acceptable list. We specifically also have an item ID system, and that system is designed for quick tagging of objects. You guys have used Unity tags before, and you have a list. Now you have an infinite list, which is nice, but they are a little bit of a pain keeping track of them, keeping them as strings, all that sort of stuff. So item IDs specifically have a string, and we have a bunch of pre-things like red, blue, correct, incorrect, player. What's another one, Bryce? Do you remember?
Good.
Good, yes. We have good and bad. Very important. And those you can use whenever you want to do, and then you don't have someone who's working on the project who, well, can't spell, like me, every time. I already mentioned about debug tools and custom inspectors. One of the other things we have is we have a lot of debug tools to go use. So the debug color changer is my favorite, because you're trying to debug something and you don't know if it's working in VR, so you just plug it in, and does it turn red? Good, it worked. What is the other thing? We also have shortcut windows. What is I looking for in here? And then the most powerful tool we have is the debug rig mover. All you VR developers, how many times have you put on your headset and the button you need to press is right there? Right? So you can use WSD and move yourself forward and move yourself up and down, which has saved me hours and hours of resetting. And also because this carpet is not designed for recognition with VR. It's going to get very confused. Last thing we have is, for this common components at least, is timers and sequencers. So you could start a timer, stop a timer, have something happen in X amount of time, have something loop 13 times. All this sort of stuff is already pre-built. And you're thinking right now, oh, I could build that. And yeah, you definitely can, but Do you really want to build it 500 times for every single application? Okay, our next category we call is do things, and we used to joke about this because we just want the thing to do the thing, basically. And do things are where we do a lot of the FX and cool features and that sort of thing. So 2 examples we have are follow target and fake parent. Like getting something to follow target, yes, that's simple. But you can do all of that and adjust what you want in the axes, in the editor, do it in play mode. You don't have to go and edit your code every single time. Same thing with fake parent. Fake parent is a neat little script that will fake the concept of Unity parenting and not actually parent the object. And we all know sometimes the Unity developers will know the meta rig does not like parenting in specific spots. Even when you do a grab object or you move something or any of that sort of stuff. But yeah, specifically access control. So you can use a lot. We use a lot for UIs, for example. You want to follow you, but you want to slowly follow you as you move around. You can do that with one single component. Then you got to, then you don't have to do the rest. The next thing is our move, rotation, and tweens. Specifically dealing with movement and tweening. Again, you can use some libraries, but we have it built in here that you tell it to move to a point. It'll move to that point, or it'll move fast to that point, or it'll teleport to that point. All those things are built into that system for you. Same thing with rotation, and we finally got it to go over 360, so you can spin, 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 and not have to worry about gimbal lock. Everyone's favorite Euler angle thing, right? Or do you guys love quaternions? Who loves quaternions? What? They're so easy. It's just a non-real 4th dimensional number. What's so complicated about that? Okay. Well, now you don't have to do it. You can just put, like, you want to go 2,050 angles, and it will spin 2,050 angles. Or negative 2,050 angles. All right, and the last thing, and Robin will kill me if I don't mention this, we have a very advanced pooled audio system. Yeah, she's so happy right now. Specifically, we use Unity's audio system. We have tools for pools, for mixers, for fading in and out audio things, so that especially audio is very expensive with how little processing power we have on those quests. Well, it's a little better now on the Quest 3, but oh, it was terrible on the Quest. You tried, Robin.
I think you just taught me this, actually, just to...
Yes.
But this is really important for this bullet help, y'all.
Yes, I know.
Keep shooting audio all day.
Yeah, with Space Dragon, we originally put... The reason why we had to do this was in Space Dragon, we had a bullet hell thing, and poor Robin, we had like 5,000 bullets on the screen, and every single one had an audio source, and every single one was playing. And it didn't run for some reason. Who knows why? But we took care of that. We also have some neat little features for that. I actually recently built a audio system that will like pulsate, so it looks like a cute little AI thing. It's moving back and forth. Tools for detecting if audio is playing or not playing, so you could like play a song and then do an event after. All that stuff is built into the audio system and ready to go. And we have quite a bit of debugging in it with colors. All right. Now, XR, I hear that's why we're here, right? Yes, slightly. Sorry, got the other stuff out of the way first. So specifically with XR, and you can see the red here is part of our things. That means it needs those things. Don't worry, we have prefabs already pre-built with this. But specifically, we have hand tracking and gesture input. Now, if any of you have done gesture input, you know it's a slight nightmare because no one uses their hands properly. Different people have different hand signals, all that sort of stuff. We specifically programmed ours so that you have, where'd they go? There. You have these specific shapes to go and use, and that allows for a universal grab or a combined gesture. I was telling these guys about the concept of everyone try and make a fist. Do you all make a fist the same way? Go, give it a try. Okay, what if someone tucks their thumb? No one tucks their thumb? Yeah, so if you are dealing with any sort of gesture recognition, if they don't make the fist tight enough or their thumb is hidden, it's going to get confused. So when you go and grab something like this, you're going to grab it like so, and where's my thumb? It's hidden. The sensor is pointing this direction. That's not very helpful. It'll be like, nope, you didn't grab it. Drop they go. So specifically, we combine the gesture of taking the pinch and the fist together. So we call it the claw because people will do this. And if they do this or this, we're good to go. Same thing with pointing. You can point. How do you guys point? Okay. I see some people have their thumb kind of out. It's not correct. It's got to be this way or this way. This doesn't count. You have to pick and choose. Welcome to gesture recognition, right? So we have that set up too. We have a universal point. We have the L shape, as we like to call it, deciding where your thumb is or thumb out. That's all built in the system, and we have, I think, 4 custom ones. So if you want to go and build your thumbs up and thumbs down, go have fun. One thing I will mention, if you're doing any gesture stuff, pick 4. That's it. No more. No more gestures than 4, and that even includes like these grab gesture, because then you're starting to get in sign language territory, and people are really bad at that, and they're gonna forget the gestures very quickly. But yes, we specifically have that built into our system, so you can go do that. And over here we have the input XR event. It'll do get up, get down, get. You can, of course, get if you need to. It'll also do double tap, triple tap, and combine too. So you can do double pinches and all that sort of stuff, which will be useful. And that's all handled via Unity event, so you don't have to worry about running any updates. This is already built into the prefab because we're talking about the pre-built rigs. So we have 2 scenes. If you want controller or you want hand tracking, you literally open up the scene. We have the prefab all set up with the most recent meta building block. It's completely compatible with that. And we set you up with the player singleton, so you can always find the player at any time. You can find, do I have it here? Oh yeah, I do. All this data from the player. Where he's looking, what his hand is, where his hand's being tracked, all that sort of data. Because you need that when you're building your applications, of course. As for XR hands, that's one interesting thing that Meta hasn't done in most of them is they seem to forget that your hands should be triggers to go select things. So we have a system called XR hand, which is kind of like a trigger, but it's already attached. And we have triggers that work with that to detect which hand you have used. Is the left hand or the right hand? Most things are just like, I hit it with a hand. I'm like, that's not helpful. I need to know if it's left or the right because I need to get input for it. We specifically have something called XR Interact, which you can put your hand in and then click it, boop it, do what you need to do. And that will handle with gesture tracking. Specifically when dealing with input, we have a system set up for our buttons. So we have buttons set up that are universal. We have 9 of them. Grab, interact, alt interact, and all that sort of thing. That's specifically designed for networking and to make things a little simpler on your side. So you have a grab or your interact, you could set that to whatever gesture or button you want. But when you're sending across the network, you don't want to send every single hand gesture. You'll be here all day. Last thing is grab objects. Now, I'm sure you've all had the joy of writing your own little thing to go grab an object and go pick it up. There's XRI, there's Meta's version, there's 1,000 of them. We specifically made one that is simple and 1 script. No interact and then 5 grab interactors to go deal with. There's just 1 script. You can open it up. You can see how it works, which means it's very easy for you to network. Now, is it fully featured with 2-hand grabbing and all that sort of stuff? No, but you can. It's all there. Yes, specifically networking, grabbing. I think I got all that done. And then we have even more components. Do you need more? So, we have our sleep, mass resetter, resettable objects, spawners, facing, activators, count puzzles, toggle objects, internet checkers. We even have separate modules for game systems, bins, checklists, security, randomizers, VFX, Unity UI, timeline, save, score, and nav mesh agents. Is that enough? Do you need more? Okay, so that seems like a lot. So specifically, we're going to limit you a little bit. If you want any extra scripts or any extra modules, it'll be in the there's a list in the documentation. You can ask me for it. Like if you want to use timeline, or you want to use some of the VFX stuff, or you specifically need to deal with security, that's all in there to go and use. All right. But yes, right now we're going to meta focus. You get all the tools, you get the pooled off view, and you get the XR movement system if you're planning to do a VR application. Do you have any questions so far?
I do actually.
Go.
Oops.
No, it's not coming to Unreal. Next.
Well, I was wondering if you had physical hand interaction.
Yes. And
So like a table, your hand like stops at the table, but
technically,
your actual hand.
technically no, because it's already built into Meta.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Oh.
The Meta hand tracking prefab already does that.
Oh.
This is with UI too, because I just realized
Yeah, you can-
the shader was broken because I pushed the UI button and then my hand went through it with the virtual hand stick and then it turned pink. And I was horrified because the pink shader means it's broken and it means I was drunk. Turns out it was just a bad material. But I was surprised. I'm like, oh look, a virtual hand. That's cool. Even with UI, so
That's cool.
it's nice that they're accommodating us these days.
One of the really funny problems about that one though is if you're doing movement at the same time. So if I'm using VR movement and I move myself forward, where's the hand supposed to go? Does it keep going until it goes here? Does my hand go through it? What's supposed to happen?
It's up to opinion thing. So.
Exactly, and that's a big problem when you come to VR because people are like, but this game did it that way, and I'm like, yeah, I know.
I was wondering for the AI that provides like some code that you guys fine-tuned, or I'm just curious, like what model and did you fine-tune it, and are you providing like a prompt, big old prompt?
No, I built a vector store.
Oh, so you're like doing a
RAG.
Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
It's not that hard. Got Llama Index for that. Come on now. Yes, he's a little out of date right now, and so I need to get him updated. But yes, I did build. I built one specifically to do some of our documentation, and specifically to build my code. Like, can you here's my code base. Can you just go and give me write for me? I'm lazy.
Yeah.
That's all developers are.
That's human condition.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do have an AI module for Unity that we've worked on quite a bit, and I have some Centis stuff working if anyone wants to try that. But that's definitely advanced if any of you haven't messed with any vector stores or, well, you don't like Quaternions, so you're not going to like them at all. All right, any other questions?
Is there extensive documentation for all the different components?
Yes, Bryce, there's extensive documentation that no one is going to read.
Oh.
My AI will read it.
Exactly. Come on, do you guys really read documentation? Come on, be honest.
I don't need to.
Yeah.
So never, because you know everything. Got it.
What is a nav mesh AI agent?
So if you're familiar with Unity, you have the nav meshes, right? So we specifically we have agents, which they're called nav mesh agent, and we're like, we don't know what else to call it, so it's our nav mesh agent system. Basically, it'll do like patrols. You can tell it where to go. You can tell it to move and all that sorts of things. So the nav mesh is just a quick, like, you could just tell something to go, but they didn't do the next step of like, tell it to go and then do the thing. Yes, here's list of modules. Any other questions about the modules? Sorry, I was a little quick on that one.
Does your tweening have an easing option?
You have a curve. Do what you want.
Okay.
You gonna do Unity now? Be faster.
It's
Any other questions for anyone else? Then we go into the live demo, and everything's gonna be perfect and not fail. Right, Bryce?
that was always work.
And if it fails, it's intentional for the purposes of the demo to show you that not everything always goes as planned.
There you go.
It's a learning experience.
Yeah.
All right. So as we said, because we've done live demos before, we're not going to try and get Oculus Link working or any of that sort of stuff, because we all know what happens when you try and do that. At least for a live demo. If you want to see it in action, we definitely will show you.
There's been 3 updates in the past 2 weeks.
Yes, I'm well aware. That's why I'm not risking it.
Tonight that I'm trying to do something.
I'm going to move this so that I can put the microphone down.
And hopefully.
Y'all can hear me.
There's also like a clippable mic if you want.
Oh, you mean like right here? Oh, no, this one.
Yeah, that
This
one
little
looks
bell?
broken.
Okay. Well, I won't move a lot, so I might just sit it on the desk
Okay.
and then just clip this. But if I do move, it's going to go flying and then it will break and I'll have to go back. Hello? Nope. Sorry.
Hello? There it is. All right. We'll do... Nope. We'll do Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Should I go higher? I can go higher up with it.
There it is.
This is hard to do. Oh, hey, good? Okay, there we go. Chris, do you have a mouse?
Yeah, I got this part. It's so easy, you don't use trackpad.
Yeah. Trackpad. I've been betrayed by the trackpad. I don't know if it's on all of a specific brand of laptop, but on my laptop, I thought Unity was for sure bugging out because it would not use the trackpad and the keyboard simultaneously. So every time I would try and like hold right click and then WASD to move, it'd be like, no, you can't move. I'm like, what's wrong with Unity? Why did it break? And it's like, no, your laptop's just very, very specific about how you use it. So I threw it in the trash. I don't need that kind of headache. Okay, there we go. So, as Chris said, one of the benefits to using GroKit Core is extremely rapid iteration, testing, getting things put into place, getting things testable, getting interactions hooked up without having to worry about going through either the initial setup for typical VR, which is like, okay, I put a meta building block and it's a grab object and I have my rig and then I go to grab it and it doesn't work. Or you hit play and it's not tracking your head and then you have to go through the typical steps to make sure, okay, first does it work, then it works, okay, now I can actually start implementing stuff. So with this, you can kind of divide and conquer. Someone might still have to do that, but while they're doing that, you could build functionality. And because we're using routing and the inward and outward activators, which we'll go over, it's a non-destructive process. It's very modular. So any functionality that you create that you route through an inward and outward activator, through our triggers, anything through our system, it just does that. So if you needed to do that at a different time or with a different kind of interaction, all you have to do is change the method with which you're interacting with it. So Chris has mentioned color changers. If you know that you put this sphere into this cube and then that thing changes color and you want it to change color, all you have to do then is just, well, okay, I want it to be my hand instead. So my hand goes in the cube, it changes color. That interaction that you set up doesn't need to be altered at all. All you have to do is change the one thing that triggers that system of interactions. So let me explain instead of just saying it. So I just have a demo scene. I have a little top-down character here that we can move around with if we want. We're not going to use them right away, but we will. So to start out, when you have the GroKit Core package installed, there's a GroKit Core menu up at the top. And there is a GroBlocks menu that you can select. So as Chris mentioned, these GroBlocks are basically, they're not just prefabs, they're combinations of components, references that are already set up for you, colors that are already set up, trigger interactions, IDs are already set up. So it's nice to start here because this will get you really close to what kind of functionality you're trying to look for. If you need to go deeper, we talk a lot about layers. So GroBlocks is usually where you start. If you can't find what you need specifically in a GroBlock, then you just look in the prefabs. If you can't find a prefab you want, then you look at the actual scripts or the components, right? So you're getting more and more granular as you need to. If anyone uses ZBrush, it's like, you sculpt big detail first, then you go to fine detail. If you model a nose and then realize you need to move it, it's a pain. Same thing with how you're going about designing your interactions. So you want to try and distill it down to the simplest thing you can. So something like Chris mentioned, either turning on or off, and typically something in most games applications, usually something is the result of either an interaction, like an input from you, or a collision or some kind of interaction between two objects. So that's typically where we like to start. So I'm going to add the now infamous debug color changer. There it is. So I'm just going to add that to the scene. I'm also going to add this debug grab with item ID because it is just something that has an item ID on it already, and I don't even want to click add component today. We will, but this is easier. And then I'm going to add an item ID trigger right there. So we have these three components, and I'm just going to center these out. So we have our color changer. This will be the thing that we want to update, or the thing that we want to alter or change. This is where we will see our result. So this is going to turn green when something happens, and it's going to turn red when that thing stops happening, is essentially a base functionality that we could say. So I have my grab object. So this debug is a grabbable object. You can see it has the GroKit XR grab object component already on it. So if we were hooked up to a headset and we hit play, I'd be able to pick this thing up, grab it, do whatever I want with it. We're not going to do that. We're just going to drag it in the editor. We're going to cheat. And then we have an item ID trigger. So this, let me get rid of all these gizmos. This is a trigger zone. So when something enters this, something will occur. So where we keep track of all these things is on our item ID trigger component. So this already has an enter and an exit event. Things are already going to happen, again, because this is a pre-made grow block. We already slotted some stuff in here. So it's going to play a little sound effect to let you know that a collision occurred. And it's going to turn the trigger, so this little cyan trigger sphere, it's going to turn it green when you enter, just to let you know that something is happening at the bare minimum. Then, down here, we see our item ID trigger settings. So we have our item ID and our group ID. So right now it's set to any, which means if any item ID enters it, this trigger will go off. I usually like to keep this as any just to make sure that works first. Then I'll go back in and change this to a specific tag. To save time, I'm just going to set this to good because it's good. And then the other thing is this item ID trigger has an outward activator slot so that we can correspond one-to-one with the outward activator of the parent object. So what that means is when something enters this trigger, we will fire the on event. And when something exits this trigger, it will fire the off event. And why that's good is we can then construct as much functionality as we want born from this trigger interaction. If I just wanted to do one thing, like change this one color changer, all I have to do on the outward activator is tell it when you're triggered, tell this color changer to do its thing. If I want to trigger 18,000 lights to turn on, all I have to do is tell this outward activator, tell all of these lights to turn on. The trigger interaction itself, how things collide, what they do when they collide, all of that is already taken care of because it's just telling this, do your on event or do your off event. I'll show an example of that too. So on our color changer, we have an inward activator. So right, as Chris was saying before, we have outward activators and inward activators. So the inward activator is everything that it is responsible for on itself. So everything that's a child object of it, anything that it's doing to itself. I thought of an analogy that kind of works, so bear with me on that. Sport. We like sports, right? Let's say football, because it's the easiest. A player is responsible for like a route, right? Wide receiver, I'm not really super like big, so like a receiver receives the ball. We all know that. So as a wide receiver, if you are told to run a play, you know what that means to you. The coach is not going to go to each individual player and be like, okay, what you're gonna do is you're gonna run that way. And then you're gonna do is you're gonna run, everyone's like, I know, like I got it. And if things change, if strategies change or whatever, all the coach has to do is say, hey, we're doing a different thing. Everyone changes in different ways what they're doing. So each player is like an inward activator. I know that when coach says to go, I'm going to light myself on fire, and I'm going to throw confetti, and I'm going to scream, right? Other players might not do that. You might change that. You may be like, the screaming thing scares people, so I'm just not going to do that. And then you just remove that from what you do. But when the coach tells you to do it, you have a very specific set of things you're doing. So then the coach in this example would be like the outward activator. It's organizing, it's managing, it's saying, okay, when I say, you all do your thing. I don't care what that thing is. Just do it. So if you think about that, what we have here, we have an inward activator that's already set up for us. It's told to change to green when the on event is activated, and change to red when the off event is activated. So all we have to do is tell this inward activator, run your on event or run your off event. And we do that from somewhere else, from an outward activator. So on our trigger, outward activator, we have an on event and an off event that's being told to run by our trigger interaction. So the trigger enters, outward activator run on, do whatever that means. So I can just add an event here, drag my color changer on, and tell the inward activator to run on. So we can kind of talk through that functionality, right? At the core of it, we want two things to collide and something to happen. So that's where we have our trigger. We know that enter and exit work because we'll see the trigger will turn green and then it'll turn back to cyan. Once we know that works, we know that because an outward activator is already slotted in, we know that the outward activator will be told to run on or off depending on the enter or exit. And because that onward activator is now telling an inward activator to run its on event every time it runs on, then it will also run its on event. I thought that breakdown of the explanation would get me to talk through the loading bar so that I could segue real smooth right into, now watch it do what I just said. But it's completing the domain, as we all know.
Stop finding the power.
Oh, well, my screen got dimmer. Oh, it's real dim up there. Oh, there, okay. Now we're screaming, we're going. Okay, so I have, be very careful. This is just like a little aside. Don't just raw click on stuff in the editor because look at this. I have done this so many times on live demos where I'm like, okay, now watch this. And I'm like, oh, my trigger's broken. No, I'm just grabbing the visual cube, not the actual grab object. So tricked you, be careful. So I grab this, I put it in the sphere. There we go, turns red. Oh, So, sorry, this is really dramatic. Why did that happen? Well, if we remember, I originally set my item ID trigger to only look for good stuff, but I never changed my grab object's item ID to be good. So right away you can see it's still doing something. If we didn't have anything happening, if this wasn't turning red, we would just assume that something was broken. So because it's turning red, it's like, well, okay, it's registering a trigger, so why isn't it triggering what I wanted it to do? So all we have to do is simply say in our item ID, and I'll change this again when we get out of play mode, and then I'll forget to do that, and then I'll wonder why it's broken again. So now it's good. So now if I move it, the trigger turns green, which means we know we're triggering it. Our grab object with our item ID turns green because it's how we set up the debug so that you can see it. And my color changer turned green. Great. Now, nothing happens when I exit because I didn't tell it to do anything when I exit. That was also for dramatic effect. So I know you're thinking to yourself on our item ID trigger, boy howdy, this would take a long time if I had to slot in an on and off event every time I wanted to do this, and I'd have to do this, and I'd have to drag my color changer in, and I'd have to say inward activator off event. I thought this was supposed to save you time. Chris, you liar. Why would you lie to me like that?
Don't go look down, read the documentation.
You have to read the documentation, right? So I know the documentation by heart. So I know that there is a super secret shortcut right here. Inward activator. There's just an inward activator slot on the outward activators. What that means is if you slot an inward activator here, when the outward runs its on, it will tell any corresponding inward activators to also run their on event. If it runs the off, it'll run the off event. So I can instead just drag this color changer onto my inward activator slot and hit play. And I'm sure it'll load a lot quicker this time. Domain. There it goes. Like I said, we're flying now. So now if I move this in here, what did I say would happen? I said that I would forget to change the tag on my item ID because I changed it to good in play mode, and I didn't do it out of play mode. So sorry. I have to trigger this back to good. There we go. Okay, so it turns green, and then when we leave, it turns red because the inward activator is being told to fire on because it's corresponding to the outward. A really good example of why this could potentially be so powerful is if I were to take this debug color changer and duplicate it a bunch and put it all the way over here, and then I grab all these, and then I do this with it, and I do that with it. So you're like, oh, cool, I have this really cool array of things that I want to fire off when you enter the collider or when something happens. So, super easy to do with our activators. So you can see I have my inward activator slotted here, but I also have this extra activators list. So what if I lock this inspector, select all the other color changers, and just drag them into this list? I almost hit play. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to change this item ID to good so that the change sticks this time. Now I'm going to play, and it'll work first time, and I won't have to act like I did it on purpose. So what should happen now is my trigger collides. It fires the on event of the outward activator. That outward activator says, hey, I have like 13 inward activators I'm responsible for. Let me tell them all to turn green. Boom. So you can scale these things incredibly well. So if you have a lot, like one of the examples that we just put together was you're carrying like an object in your hand and it has a specific tag, and half of the switches that you interact with have a tag of like red and the other half have a tag of blue, and depending on which one you put it in, all of the blue doors will disappear or all of the red doors will disappear. Well, and then, yeah, there's a couple other examples too that I'll show. So if we want this to trigger in some other way, all we have to do is change the method with which it's triggered. So right now, I'm just like dragging and dropping this in here. But we could set up a more complex example. So I'll get rid of that. What I can do is I can make, well, actually, we'll leave this here. I'm just going to unpack the prefab completely. And I'm going to rename this. This will be falling trigger, something like that. And I'm going to make this a prefab. So this is where we're talking about extending functionality. So this is where you can start to look at the other components that we have, other documentation, other things that you might be able to implement in combination to extend kind of backwards through your functionality. So we know now that this will trigger all of the cubes to turn green, but we might want to change the method in which that happens. So we can start to think about more complex functionality. So I have this falling trigger, I have it prefab. So what I can do is I could come up to my GroBlocks and I could do something like a spawner. So we have this continuous object spawner. So I'll add that to the scene. So here's a continuous object spawner. Again, it has an inward activator because it needs to be told what to do. The inward activator is already set up to tell the looped timer to start when it's activated and stop when it's deactivated. Then we have our actual base spawner itself. So this is what's actually spawning the objects. You can see objects to spawn. We have an example gravity object already in here. I'm going to give it my falling trigger, and then I'm also going to make sure that I don't turn kinematic on for that, so it does fall. So I'm telling it, spawn this falling trigger, and then our looped timer component is telling the base spawner to spawn its object at 1 second. So if I set this to is active on start, current interval is 1, this loop timer will count 1 second, then it will run its event on complete. So on complete, I'm telling it, tell the base spawner to spawn its object. So then the base spawner will spawn its object, that object will spawn, it will fall, hopefully it will hit my trigger, hopefully it will trigger the functionality. This is also set to infinite loops, so it's just going to do it like every 1 second. So let's see. Oh, okay, good. Big moment. So that's an example of a combination of functionality you could set up to, again, we didn't change our trigger interaction. Since I started this, it's still just been an item ID object interacting with an item ID trigger. Channeling through the, or routing through the inward activator, through the outward activators, telling things to do what they need to do. So if I wanted to set every other cube here to also like play an audio sound, or if I wanted to set every other cube to destroy itself if the wrong thing is triggered, all I'd have to do is come to the inward activator of this and tell it to do that thing on itself, and then everything would fall in line. Another example that we concocted before was something like this. So we're going to have a little mini game kind of thing. So the hypothetical proposed functionality of this is there is going to be a locked door and you need to get through the door. So then we work backwards from that. We say, okay, the door needs to open, and then something needs to trigger that door to open. And in this case, we thought about using the follower to have like a little companion fella. So we're going to have a follower object that's going to be in a location. You have to go to that location to pick the follower up. It will then follow you. The follower will have a trigger on it that is the correct trigger to open the door. So you can't go through the door until you get the follower. So that's the proposed functionality. So let's see how that would work. Again, I'll come up to my GroBlocks, and I will type follower. So we have this target offset follower. It's got a little face. So you know that it's looking at you. How many times have we made like a capsule with a little cube for a nose so you know which way your character is facing? So this time we just gave it eyes. Okay, so we have a little follower object. On this object we have an inward activator, as always. So we can tell it, do your thing whenever we need you to do your thing. Right now, because it's a grow block, it's got some preset stuff in there. So when this on event is run, the start to follow with offset will trigger. And what that means is it will start following you in whatever offset you currently have with it. So if you get really close to it and you trigger this, it'll follow really close. So we'll probably want to put the thing that triggers this at a decent distance so that you can still see it following you. So we have this item ID trigger, and we have a bunch of missing components now because they're all gone, so don't worry about that. Oop. Hello, 0, please. Thank you. I'll delete that too. So when we collide with this, we just simply want to tell the follower, start following. And the only way we really want to do that is by telling the inward activator to run its on event. Just with that example, you can start to see why activators are really nice, if you haven't already. So if I had something like, when I trigger this item ID trigger, tell this follower to follow me, and if I use the follower component specifically, and I also wanted to trigger an audio, and I use an audio source .play specifically, and I wanted to trigger a color change using material.color specifically, and I wanted to change all that, I would have to find the trigger that does that. Then I would have to find all the events that it's related to on the individual components. What happens if someone removes the follower component from this object to move it to a parent object? Now the reference is broken. But if it's all on your inward activator, and you change it there and fix it there, you know everything else is still fine. Everything else still works. So it's about isolation. It's about making sure that you can compartmentalize stuff, because especially during like a hackathon, you don't want to change one thing and then everything else breaks and you're like, oh, cool. Like, didn't think I would have the need to debug everything we've done so far. So isolation in that regard is very convenient for hackathons. And it also, I mean, for normal work too. Like, I don't like to waste time. So it's good that if this saves any. So when this item ID trigger fires, we will just simply tell the follower to run its on and off event. And because this is an outward activator, we have an inward activator slot. All we have to do is drag and drop this here. So this item ID trigger, as we know, is looking for an item ID tagged good. And we have our top-down character here, which has a box collider and a rigid body and an item ID. So I'll set this to good. So what should happen when I play is my player should walk into this trigger. What happened? Oh, that was weird. Oh, okay, it's still thinking. I was like, it's not working. And I already clicked pause, so let me unpause. Okay. So I walk into the trigger. Oh, I have an error. Oh, because I didn't assign it. I'm so sorry. It needs to know what it's following. This is why it's important to read the documentation. See this big red thing that Chris programmed in here so that I make sure not to miss it? So it'd be like, hey, dummy, you need something here. You need a target. What is it supposed to follow?
Stop following it. Use the trigger, Bryce.
Yeah, what would I do about that, I wonder? So let me tell it to actually follow the character. And okay, so in the interest of time, and we'll save on the dramatics, I suppose, what would happen is as soon as I left this trigger, it would turn back off, right? Because we're running the off event of the trigger by exiting, which runs the off event of the outward activator, which runs the outward off event of the inward. So in this case, what we would want to do on our item ID trigger, instead of slotting this directly in, we can just do the on event and tell our follower to run its on event. This way it's not running the off event once we leave. Okay, now for real this time. There we go. Okay, so. Oh, it's already following me. I think I told it to follow and start. So sorry. Follow and start is turned on. Again. Documentation. So the follow target, as we can see, also has a lot of different parameters. If you just want this to follow in a specific axis, like if you just want something to go up and down with you, that's like a little game type that we devised as well. The thing would only follow you up and down, and so you'd have to platform around, but there would be obstacles that would be going in and out of this thing, so you had to be very careful when you platformed to ascend the thing, because if you did it the wrong time, it would hit like a fireball and it would die. So you had to escort it upward while being very cognizant of where you were doing. So there we go. And now it follows us. Come with me, little buddy. And it's looking at us, and I stepped over it. I didn't mean to be rude. So now, what we could do is we could set up something like a simple door There it is. Boom. Pretend it's a door. And there's like a little door frame there and there. It's a gate. How about that? We'll call it a gate. So, super easy. We don't have to get into the do movement and the tweening and all that fancy stuff yet. We can if we have time. So what we could do instead is just turn it on or off, right? So I will add an inward activator here. And I will just simply tell, we will make this a child object actually. So we'll call this gate. So let me put this on the gate itself. So we will simply tell the cube to turn itself off when the on activator is run. Now, if you wanted to, this comes down to personal preference, how you want to like phrase your routing. So there's an internal conflict that we have where the on event is the thing you're trying to do, and so turning the door off with the on event makes sense in my brain because that's forward progress. But to other people, the on event turning it off is an opposite. So the on event should always turn it on, and so when you trigger the thing, you should actually trigger the off event specifically. And in my mind, the routing on that is flipped, and that would be difficult for me to read. So we have different opinions on that, certain people. Chris?
I don't know that.
No, I don't know what you're talking about. So we want this gate's inward activator to run so that it will turn the gate off and we can make progress. So I'm just going to grab my item ID trigger and duplicate it and put it over here. I'm going to give it a different tag. So I will give this the tag of correct, let's say. And instead of running the on event here, I'm just going to run the activator, the inward activator, on my gate. So this trigger is now listening for the correct tag. When the correct tag enters this trigger, then the outward activator will run, which will tell the inward activator to run the on event, which will turn the cube off, granting us progress. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger just so it's a little easier for our character to run into. So now I just need to put an item ID on my follower. So my follower is following my target. I can put an item ID on this, give it the correct tag. I also need to make sure that it can actually do collision. So just in case, I'm going to do is gravity kinematic, and I'm going to give this a nice little sphere collider set to is trigger. So that should be all we need. So I'm going to move this follower over here. So I need to get through the door. We'll see that my player won't trigger the door trigger because it's not set to any, it's set to correct. And my player is not correct, my player is good. There's a difference. We can get the philosophy of that maybe a little bit later. So nothing happens there. I come in here, I get my follower object. I can now move into here, get in there, and the door vanishes.
Nice.
Right. So like, I mean, that's like practically a video game. Then if we wanted to get fancy, so again, talking about layers, so that's just, it's very binary, right? It's on, off. It's did the thing collide, is it on, set active, on and off, turn things on and off. Once you see colors changing, things turning on and off, then you can start to dig deeper into some of the other components. So as an example of just flipping this functionality, on my gate, instead of just turning this object off with an inward activator, I might come into my cube and give this a do movement component. And the object to move will be itself, in this case. I'm going to have it do a local move. Well, no, we'll do global because it's a gate. It's going up. So it should just go up no matter what weird direction I end up rotating it. So on my inward activator, I can tell this cube, do movement. And then we have a bunch of functions. Again, documentation. Check it out. It's real cool. Move by Y, because Y is up, unlike in Unreal, which has me messed up every day because I'm like, oh yeah, Z, right. Blue is up. So we want it to move by Y. Actually, we'll do a move to Y. So move by would be like if you needed it to be incremental or if you needed it to be kind of universal. If it's local, it's already universal anyway. Like it's local to the object. So if you wanted it to move by 10 units and you always had it parented, no matter where you put it, it would still be 10 units. But there's a lot of flexibility to that. So we're going to move it to. Right now, its Y is at 0.1, and let's say we want it to go up to here, so that's 1.1. So we'll say move to Y 1.1. And then on the off event, I could do the same thing. I could tell this to come back down if I wanted to. Now, it's a door, and I want to make sure I be able to get through the door like in time before it goes back down. So we'll see if that works. So we'll do move to Y, and then we'll put it back to this value. So I'll just copy and paste that there. So all we've done is change what the gate does. So we don't have to worry about, did the trigger break, did the follower break, did any of that stuff break? That all worked, and it turned the door off. So now we just changed, instead of turning the door off, move. So now, again, isolation. If something breaks now, it's probably due movement. And it's probably because I bugged Chris and said, this isn't behaving how I thought it should, why not? And then, bless his heart, he makes like 18 new functions that do exactly what it's supposed to, and then it works brilliantly. We're at that part now where it works brilliantly. So this should be beautiful.
I hope.
It better be beautiful. Also, we'll skip a step 2 because I think we're out of time, and I just want to get super fancy. So on the follower, like you had mentioned, with easing, so here's my curve. So I'm just going to change this to something real exaggerated. So it's going to creak open. It's going to like shudder a little bit. It's going to dip in, and then it's going to slowly, and then it's going to be like, and it's going to pop. Hopefully, unless curves are only like in the editor before runtime, and then this won't do it. Okay, got my follower. Come over to my door. It's tank controls, so forgive me. There it goes. Pops. And then slams back down, and then bam. So then if we wanted to do things like add effects, like if we had like a sparking effect to make it look like it's grinding upward, we could have it spawn that, and then when it reaches the end, the particle effects could die out. So we have an FX spawner specifically for that. Not only does it instantiate an object, but it starts a timer, so you can tell it when to like kill the particle effect, because if you've used particle effects in Unity a lot, you know that sometimes you'll shoot a bunch of stuff, and then you'll look and you'll be like, oh, there's a whole list of particle systems that are just there that aren't running anymore because they're not set to loop or whatever, but they're not destroying themselves when they're supposed to either. So that's what the FX spawner is. Again, documentation. Okay, I went 2 minutes over. I apologize, but I got through all the examples I wanted to. So does anyone have any questions I can answer about any of this stuff? I'm sorry if it was really fast. Okay, cool. You can go to our website. Do you have it put bookmarked? The presentation. Here it is. There it is. 3poundxr.com/GroKit-core. If you go there, you can sign up for the beta. Oh yeah, there's a QR code. Yeah, that.